The throne room of the Valkyrie Empire glittered like a storm of stars trapped inside metal walls. Golden light flowed through glass veins in the floor, and every breath seemed to echo. The Valkyrie were tall, proud, and strong, their skin marked with glowing blue lines of energy that pulsed when they felt emotion. At the center of that vast hall sat Queen Seralis, the ruler of 10,000 worlds. Her eyes burned like twin sapphires filled with calm authority. Around her stood the generals, the nobles, and the admirals of the fleet, all waiting for her next command. War had come again. The outer colonies had risen in rebellion. Ships burned in the dark between stars. The Queen's advisors shouted for vengeance and blood. But Seralis sat in silence, her mind weighing every word. Every face, every choice. Finally, she rose from her throne and spoke softly. The rebellion has begun. Our fleets are stretched thin. I must choose a champion, someone to guard the royal fleet and lead the defense of our homeworld. The generals straightened with pride. Warriors from noble houses stepped forward, their armor shining. Each of them bowed, confident that one of their names would be chosen. But Seralis's gaze moved past them, to the edge of the hall. There, standing quietly in a simple uniform of gray, was a human. He looked small among the towering aliens, his hair a little messy, his hands stained from machine grease. His name was Ethan Cole, a human engineer assigned to the royal fleet as part of a trade exchange between Earth and the Valkyrie. Ethan did not speak. He never did unless spoken to. His brown eyes stayed focused, calm, and thoughtful. He looked more like a technician from a small ship than someone who belonged in the grand palace of a galactic queen. But Seralis had noticed something. The way he moved, the way he watched, the way he solved problems others ignored. When the great Valkyrie engines had failed during a storm in hyperspace, Ethan was the one who crawled into the machinery, fixed the impossible, and brought everyone home alive. He had not asked for reward. He had simply said, it just needed a bit of thinking. Your Majesty. Now, as the nobles waited for the Queen's decision, Seralis's voice cut through the silence like a blade. I choose Ethan Cole of Earth. The entire hall froze. Whispers broke out instantly. Some gasped, others shouted. A few even laughed. A human? Surely she jests. Your Majesty, he is an engineer, not a warrior. General Carax, her most trusted military leader, stepped forward. His deep voice rumbled like thunder. Your Majesty, with respect, this is unwise. Humans are weak compared to the Valkyrie. This one has no battle record. You cannot place him in command of the Royal Guard. But Seralis's eyes remained steady. You mistake strength for muscle, General. I choose him because he sees what others do not. Carax tried to argue again, but one look from the Queen silenced him. Ethan stepped forward slowly. His heart pounded in his chest. He had never been this close to so many Valkyrie nobles before. Their height and presence made him feel like a child among giants. He bowed politely. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I'm honored, but I'm no soldier. Are you sure? Seralis studied him for a moment, then smiled in a small, knowing smile. I am sure, human. The others have strength in their arms. You have strength in your mind. And right now, that is what I need. He wanted to refuse. He was an engineer, not a hero. But when he saw the calm trust in her eyes, something inside him decided to accept. I'll do my best. Your Majesty, he said, and the Queen nodded. That night, in the great halls of the capital, the Valkyrie laughed over glowing cups of fire wine. They whispered that their queen had gone soft. Choosing a human. Madness. He'll run at the first sign of danger. Humans are clever, yes, but this is war. Ethan heard the words but said nothing. He spent his time studying the battle data, the fleet maps, and the enemy's movements. He sat alone in the royal command room, eyes fixed on the glowing display. The rebellion's fleet was larger, faster, and better armed. The Valkyrie generals planned a direct assault, the same strategy they had used for centuries. But Ethan frowned. Something about the pattern looked wrong. He leaned closer, tapping the data with his finger. They're baiting us, he murmured. They want us to charge in. When he tried to explain it to the generals, they dismissed him. We do not hide behind tricks, they said. We fight with honor. Ethan sighed quietly. He was used to this kind of pride. He had seen it before on Earth. People who mistook stubbornness for strength. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he worked alone, designing a plan that might save them all. The next morning, alarms rang across the royal fleet. The enemy had arrived, a swarm of rebel ships, dark and fast, emerging from the void. The Queen stood on the bridge of her flagship, her armor shining like liquid silver. "Prepare all ships for defense," she commanded. The fleet moved into formation. Weapons ready, then Ethan stepped forward. He looked nervous but determined. "Your Majesty," he said, "if I may, I have a plan." The generals rolled their eyes. Now is not the time for human games. But Seralis raised her hand. "Let him speak." Ethan quickly explained. His plan was not to fight head-on. Instead, he wanted to use decoys, drones, and empty cargo pods to create false signals. The rebels would think they were attacking the royal flagship but would actually be shooting at illusions. "It's risky," he admitted, "but it could confuse them long enough to turn the tide." General Carax looked disgusted. "Deception? That is cowardice." Seralis's voice was firm. "No, that is strategy." She turned to Ethan. "Do it." Within minutes, humans and Valkyrie worked side by side. Ethan's quick thinking turned old mining drones into signal jammers. Cargo containers were filled with heat generators to appear like ships. The fleet repositioned silently under his direction. When the enemy fired, their shots hit nothing but empty space. Confused, they turned their fire toward what they thought was the Queen's ship, only to destroy their own allies who were hidden nearby. The Queen's fleet opened fire at the perfect moment. In less than an hour, the rebellion's first wave was destroyed, and not a single Valkyrie ship was lost. When silence returned to space, the Valkyrie crew stood frozen. None of them could believe what had just happened. A quiet human, the one they had laughed at, had saved them all. Seralis turned to him slowly. "How did you know?" she asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "On Earth, we learned that strength without thought only leads to ruin. I just paid attention." The Queen looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, "Perhaps I was not mistaken after all." Around them, the stars burned silently, and the Valkyrie began to realize that this human might be far more dangerous, far more powerful than anyone had imagined. The great hall of the royal flagship was silent after the battle. The Valkyrie officers stared at the human who had turned the impossible into victory. A few still looked unsure, their pride bruised, but others stared at Ethan Cole with new respect. Queen Seralis stood at the center of the bridge, her armor faintly glowing in the dim blue light of the consoles. Her calm voice filled the room. "You saved thousands of lives today, Ethan of Earth. The Empire owes you." Ethan shook his head. "I just saw what the enemy was trying to do." "Anyone could have figured it out," General Carax growled quietly. "No, human. None of us did. You used trickery that only a mind like yours could create." Seralis glanced toward Carax, slightly amused. "Do you admit the human was right, General?" Carax's eyes narrowed. "I admit. The result speaks for itself." The Queen smiled faintly, then turned back to Ethan. "Your plan worked because you looked beyond tradition. You saw patterns where we saw glory. Perhaps that is your people's strength." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe. Humans like to stay alive more than we like looking brave." The Queen laughed softly, a rare sound in her palace. The Valkyrie officers looked shocked, for it was uncommon to hear her laugh. But Seralis didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt hope. The calm before another storm days passed. The rebellion's first fleet was gone, but the war was far from over. Reports came in from the outer colonies, enemy forces regrouping, gathering allies, spreading lies that the Queen had grown weak. The Council demanded another show of power, a massive attack to crush the rebellion once and for all. But Seralis had learned something from Ethan's quiet logic. Strength alone was not victory. She called for a meeting in the war room. The circular chamber shimmered with light from dozens of holographic stars. Ethan stood quietly beside her, surrounded by Valkyrie generals who still eyed him with unease. Seralis began. "The rebels have regrouped in the Varnus sector. Their leader, Admiral Threx, commands 5 fleets and holds the mines that power our weapons. We must end this before he spreads further." Carax folded his arms. "Then let us strike first. Hit them hard. Show them the strength of the Empire." Ethan studied the map for a long moment. "That's what they expect us to do," he said softly. The room turned to him. He stepped closer to the glowing image. "Look here," he said. pointing to a small cluster of moons behind the enemy's main base. They have almost no patrols here. It looks unimportant. That means it's important. They're hiding something. Seralis leaned closer. What do you think they are hiding, human? Supplies, reinforcements, maybe the real command ship. If we attack the front, we walk into a trap. But if we strike here first, we take away their strength before the battle even starts. The generals exchanged uneasy glances. Impossible, one of them said. No fleet could pass undetected through that area. The asteroids there are unstable. Ethan smiled slightly. That's why they'll never expect it. But I'll need freedom to prepare the operation my way. Seralis nodded without hesitation. Granted, the generals gasped. Your Majesty, her voice cut through their protest. He has earned the right to try. Ethan nodded respectfully. Then give me 2 days. I'll show you another way to win. The humans' way in the following hours, Ethan worked nonstop. He gathered engineers, pilots, and technicians, both Valkyrie and humans who served on exchange programs. He asked for old ships, drones, and damaged hulls that no one wanted. His team thought he was crazy, but they followed his instructions. He used broken vessels as bait, programming them to send fake transmissions and light signatures. He turned maintenance drones into mobile signal mirrors, bouncing the enemy's radar back at them. The Valkyrie had never seen such tactics before. They were a warrior species, straightforward, powerful, proud. Ethan's way seemed messy, unpredictable, even dishonorable. But the Queen watched in silence, her eyes sharp and curious. One evening, as he stood over a table filled with maps, she entered the chamber quietly. You work without rest? She said softly. Ethan looked up, surprised. Your Majesty, sorry. She waved a hand. No apology. You think differently than my people. You find victory where others see chaos. Ethan hesitated. On Earth, we never had the luxury of perfect wars. We had to fight smarter, not stronger. Seralis studied him for a moment. Tell me, human, what drives your kind to survive so fiercely? Ethan thought for a while before answering. Because we had to. Earth was never easy. Our world tried to kill us in 100 ways. Storms, diseases, wars, hunger. We learned to adapt. It's what makes us human. The Queen nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. Adaptability. That is your true weapon. Ethan gave a small smile. Maybe, but I hope we can end this fight before we have to use all of it. The Battle of the Hidden Moons, 2 days later. The plan was ready. The Queen's fleet moved silently through the shadowed asteroid fields of the Varnus sector. Broken rocks floated around them like black giants, and static storms flashed across the void. Ethan's decoy ships went ahead first. The enemy's sensors picked them up, dozens of royal ships moving right into the trap. Admiral Threx, the rebellion's leader, laughed from his command chair. The Fool Queen comes again! Prepare all cannons! The rebels opened fire, destroying the fake ships instantly, but each explosion released a cloud of electromagnetic dust that jammed their scanners. While the enemy fired blindly, the real royal fleet slipped behind the asteroid belt. Now, Ethan said calmly, dozens of stealth drones activated, projecting false energy signatures on the other side of the battlefield. The rebels turned toward them and exposed their entire flank. The Queen gave a single command. Fire. Valkyrie plasma cannons lit the darkness. The enemy fleet shattered under the surprise assault. On the bridge, Seralis stood tall, watching the enemy fall apart with controlled pride. Remarkable, she whispered. Ethan looked at the tactical screen, voice calm. It's not over yet. Their flagship hasn't moved. The Queen frowned. What do you mean? Their leader isn't retreating. He's waiting. At that moment, a new signal appeared. A massive ship emerging from behind the moons, larger than anything they had seen before. Admiral Threx had been hiding his true flagship all along. The Queen's fleet prepared to fire again, but Threx's weapon systems activated first. A blinding light filled the void as a massive energy beam struck out, hitting several Valkyrie cruisers. The bridge shook violently. Seralis grabbed the edge of her command seat. Status. Shields at 60%, shouted an officer. Ethan steadied himself, scanning the data. Their main guns charging again. We can't outgun them, but maybe we can outthink them. He leaned closer to the console, typing quickly. Your Majesty, give me control of the drone network. Without hesitation, she nodded. Do it. Ethan rerouted the drones toward the enemy flagship. The tiny machines weaved between rocks, broadcasting false signals. The rebel ship's targeting system became confused, unable to lock on to the real Queen's vessel. Then Ethan sent the drones directly into the massive ship's reactor vents, each carrying a magnetic pulse generator. The enemy flagship suddenly went dark. Seralis stared in disbelief as the massive ship lost power and drifted helplessly. "You disabled it?" Ethan exhaled. "Just long enough." The Queen's fleet fired one last time, striking the powerless warship. The explosion was bright enough to light the asteroid field for minutes. The aftermath silence filled the bridge again. The battle was over. The officers slowly began to cheer, pounding their fists against their armor. Even General Carax gave a respectful nod toward Ethan. Seralis turned toward him, her expression calm but her eyes glowing faintly with pride. "You've done it again, human. Twice you've saved my people." Ethan shrugged lightly. "You gave me a chance. That's all I needed." The Queen stepped closer. "Perhaps it is time my people learn what your kind truly are." He smiled. "Maybe one day they will." She looked at the stars through the viewport, the debris slowly fading into darkness, and whispered, "I chose a human to lead when others laughed. Now they will not laugh again." The stars outside the Queen's flagship glowed faintly as the royal fleet drifted in silent victory. The great battle of the Hidden Moons was over, and the rebellion had suffered a terrible defeat. Inside the royal palace ship, the mood was lighter than it had been in months. Valkyrie officers laughed in the halls again. Crews spoke with pride about the Queen's command and the strange human who had made victory possible. Ethan Cole, however, didn't join in the celebrations. He sat quietly in the engineering bay, repairing one of the old drones that had helped him win the battle. His hands moved with steady precision as sparks flickered around him. He preferred the company of machines. They didn't judge or mock, and they always told the truth through their data. "Still working?" Came a familiar voice from behind him. Ethan turned to see Queen Seralis standing at the doorway, her silver armor replaced by a flowing blue robe that shimmered like starlight. He quickly stood. "Your Majesty." "I wasn't expecting—" She raised a hand lightly. "You may relax, Ethan. I came to thank you again." He smiled faintly. "You already did, twice." "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "But gratitude is not enough. You've changed how my people see humans. That is no small thing." Ethan looked down at his hands. "I didn't mean to change anything. I just didn't want to lose more people." Seralis studied him for a moment. "Your kind truly fights differently. Not for glory, but for life itself." He nodded slowly. "On Earth, survival always came first. It's in our blood." The Queen smiled softly. "Then perhaps that is what makes you dangerous." Before Ethan could reply, the ship's alarm suddenly blared through the walls. The intruders. The blue lights on the walls turned red. A voice echoed over the intercom. "Security breach. Unknown life signs aboard Deck 9. Seralis's eyes narrowed. "Deck 9? That's near the central command vault." Ethan grabbed his tool belt and followed her as they rushed through the hallways. Guards ran past them, weapons drawn, armor glowing. The ship shook slightly. Small explosions echoed through the corridors. When they reached Deck 9, the air smelled faintly of burned metal. 2 Valkyrie soldiers lay unconscious near the security door. Seralis knelt beside them. Alive, stunned only. Ethan examined the door panel. Forced open using a plasma cutter. Someone's trying to reach the main data core. The Queen's voice turned cold. "Assassins. The rebellion's last weapon." Before she could call for reinforcements, Ethan touched her arm lightly. "Wait, if they came this far, they'll have traps set for your guards." "Let me go first." Her eyes widened. "You would face them alone?" He gave a small shrug. "You said it yourself. Humans are adaptable." Seralis hesitated. She wanted to refuse. But the look in his eyes, calm, fearless, and unshaken, told her this was not an ordinary man. She nodded. "Go then. But be careful, human." Ethan smiled briefly. "Always." The fight in the shadows, the hall beyond the door was dark and filled with smoke. Sparks flickered from damaged circuits. Ethan moved silently, keeping low, his breathing slow and controlled. He had no weapon, only a small multi-tool he always carried. But his eyes scanned every corner with the sharpness of a trained soldier. His mind went back to his old life, to the days before he became an engineer. The years of harsh training in the Earth Defense Corps, The survival missions, the lessons of how to stay alive when everything went wrong. He had left that life behind long ago. But some skills never faded. A faint movement caught his attention. A shadow shifted near a cluster of pipes. Ethan moved quietly, pretending not to notice. When the figure lunged out, he spun fast, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting. The alien assassin, tall and armored, hit the ground with a crash. Ethan struck the weak point in the armor's joint, disabling the weapon system. The other two assassins charged from the side. Ethan dodged the first, ducked under a plasma blade, and used his momentum to throw one into the wall. The impact knocked the breath out of the enemy. The last one hesitated, clearly surprised. Humans weren't supposed to move like that. Ethan's expression stayed calm. "You can still surrender." The assassin hissed and rushed forward. Ethan sidestepped and hit a control panel. A blast door dropped between them, cutting the enemy off completely. He exhaled slowly. Guess not. When the hall was silent again, he checked the wounded guards to make sure they were alive, then activated the security seal to prevent more intruders. The Queen arrives minutes later. Queen Seralis arrived with her elite guards. Her eyes swept over the scene. The unconscious assassins, the smoke, and Ethan standing unharmed among them. For a moment, she said nothing. Her expression was unreadable, almost stunned. Finally, she spoke softly. "You fought them. Alone." Ethan shrugged modestly. They weren't ready for someone who didn't fight by their rules. Carax, who had come with the guards, looked astonished. "You're no simple engineer." Ethan smiled faintly. "I used to be a soldier once." "Back on Earth." Seralis tilted her head, curious. "You never mentioned this before." "It didn't seem important," he said quietly. "I just wanted to fix ships, not fight wars again." The Queen stepped closer, studying him in the dim light. "You hide strength behind humility. You fight with skill, but also with restraint." That was rare. Ethan didn't answer. He simply picked up one of the assassin's dropped weapons and handed it to a Valkyrie guard. "Next time," he said calmly, "they'll send more." Seralis looked at him, her voice turning serious. "Then they will find both of us ready." Respect-earned news of what happened spread quickly through the royal fleet. The story of how a single human had defeated trained assassins became legend within hours. Valkyrie soldiers began to nod respectfully when Ethan passed. Some even saluted him, a rare honor for an off-worlder, but Ethan didn't enjoy the fame. He spent most of his time in the hangar, helping rebuild ships and train engineers. When Seralis visited, she found him working as always, focused and calm. "You could command your own fleet now," she said one day. "My people would follow you," he smiled. "I'm better at fixing things than commanding them." "Yet you fix more than machines," she replied softly. "You fix hope." Her words made him pause. He didn't know how to respond, so he simply went back to his work. For a long moment, the Queen watched him silently, her blue eyes thoughtful. She had ruled for decades and seen countless warriors, but this human, with no armor, no title, and no pride, had done what others could not. He had changed how she saw strength itself. The enemy's shadow. That night, Seralis stood alone in her observation chamber, gazing out at the stars. She spoke quietly to her communication officer. "Find out who sent those assassins. Trace their signal." The officer nodded. "At once, Your Majesty." A moment later, static filled the room and a hologram flickered to life. The image of a scarred alien appeared, dressed in rebel insignia. It was Admiral Threx, the rebellion's leader, the same man whose fleet Ethan had defeated. "So," the hologram said coldly, "the human lives. I underestimated him." Seralis's eyes hardened. "You sent killers into my ship. That was your final mistake." Threx's cruel smile widened. "No, Queen. My mistake was not understanding that your empire hides behind a human's cleverness. But I have learned now. Next time I will not face him with ships. I will face him with something he cannot plan for." The image vanished. Seralis stood still for a long time, her reflection shining against the glass. Then she whispered to herself, "You think you can break a human spirit? You have no idea what they are made of." The quiet before the next war and the following days, peace returned briefly. The Valkyrie fleet repaired its ships. The stars seemed calm again. But deep down, both Seralis and Ethan knew the war wasn't over. One evening, they stood together on the observation deck, looking at the twin suns rising over the horizon of the royal world. Do you regret choosing me? Ethan asked quietly. The Queen looked at him, her voice calm but proud. No, human, I chose you because I saw something in your eyes that my people have forgotten. The strength to endure. Ethan smiled faintly. Then I'll keep trying not to disappoint you. Seralis turned back to the stars. You haven't disappointed me once. For a long time, they stood there in silence, two very different beings bound by respect, watching the galaxy that still waited to test them. And somewhere far away in the darkness of space, Admiral Threx began preparing his final strike, one that would push both the Queen and her chosen human beyond anything they had faced before. The calm after the battle in the Hidden Moons did not last. Reports from the outer sectors poured into the Queen's flagship. Admiral Threx, humiliated and enraged, had gathered new fleets and allied with smaller pirate groups across several systems. His ships were faster, his weapons stronger, and his determination deadly. Queen Seralis stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy. The enemy grows bold, she said softly. They believe our human is their weakness. Ethan Cole, standing beside her, did not flinch. His brown eyes studied the data, scanning patterns that even the most experienced Valkyrie officers missed. Your Majesty, he said, their confidence is their mistake. They think we will react predictably. But we can surprise them, again, the generals murmured among themselves. Some still doubted his strategies. Carax in particular had grown wary. They've had time to adapt. Can your human tricks work twice? He asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. Seralis turned to him sharply. Do not question him, General. You may not see it, but he understands war in ways you cannot. Ethan raised a hand to calm the rising tension. I'm not asking anyone to follow blind faith. I just need freedom to prepare. The Queen nodded. Granted. Your plan will guide our forces. A new strategy Ethan immediately set to work. He studied every report from the outer colonies, cross-referenced ship movements, and observed the enemy's supply routes. Unlike the Valkyrie, who relied on sheer force and reputation, he looked for patterns in logic and human psychology. Humans are predictable in their need to control the situation, he explained to Seralis. They will respond to what they think is a threat, even if it's fake. That's our advantage. He assigned teams to convert old cargo vessels into decoys, programmed drones to create false signals, and prepared specialized hybrid weapons that combined Valkyrie energy cannons with human engineering. The Queen watched him work, fascinated by his calm precision. Every move seemed effortless, yet every detail was exact. You move like a warrior, she observed quietly. Ethan glanced up, smiling faintly. I once was. But fighting ships isn't about strength alone. It's about predicting the other side before they can act. Seralis nodded. Then you will lead us not with muscle but with mind. That is your gift. The first skirmish days. Later, the Valkyrie fleet approached the outer edge of the contested sector. Enemy scouts appeared almost immediately, and reports confirmed that Admiral Threx had positioned his strongest forces to protect the supply chain. Ethan studied the holographic display. They expect a frontal attack, he said calmly. We won't give it to them. He directed the fleet through a narrow asteroid field, dangerous but perfect for concealment. The enemy scrambled to intercept, firing blindly into the shadows. Every shot that went astray strengthened Ethan's advantage. When they reached the hidden flanks, Ethan triggered the decoy fleet. Energy signatures flashed across enemy sensors. The rebels, believing they were striking the main fleet, fired all their weapons at the wrong positions. Queen Seralis watched the confusion unfold. Her lips curved into a small, approving smile. Incredible, she murmured. The human moves like a shadow. Carax could only gape at the results. I have never seen tactics like this. The enemy flagship took heavy damage, forced to retreat while smaller ships were destroyed or disabled. The Valkyrie losses were minimal, all thanks to Ethan's careful planning. The true test but victory was short-lived. A few hours later, communications flagged an emergency. Admiral Threx had concentrated his forces near the Valara Nebula, a dangerous cloud of ionized gas that interfered with most Valkyrie sensors. Seralis's voice was calm but firm. Prepare for battle. This time we face their core fleet. Ethan studied the nebula on the map. Their advantage is the nebula, but we can use it too. They rely on sensors, we rely on thinking. If we move fast and silent, they won't see us coming. The fleet adjusted accordingly. Ethan personally oversaw the navigation calculations, guiding ships through the shifting gases, avoiding dangerous gravitational pockets and unpredictable electric storms. The moment they emerged on the other side, the enemy was caught off guard. Ethan's hybrid weapons fired in perfect sequence, disabling several key ships before they could react. Seralis observed quietly as the human she had chosen orchestrated the battlefield. Every command, every decision was precise. Unlike Valkyrie generals who often relied on force and intimidation, Ethan's strategies were subtle but lethal in effect. The Queen in danger, the tide of the battle turned in their favor. But amidst the chaos, a massive enemy cruiser managed to break through the Valkyrie line and headed straight for the Queen's flagship. "Ethan!" Seralis shouted. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing a tactical console, he rerouted nearby drones to create false signals and deployed energy nets to trap the massive ship's path. Still, the cruiser fired a charged plasma beam directly at the flagship. Seralis braced for impact. If it hits, but Ethan acted faster. He manually piloted a small fighter, weaving through the nebula and directly into the path of the beam. With precise timing, he triggered an energy field from the fighter, redirecting the plasma into a nearby asteroid cluster. The explosion shook the nebula, destroying the enemy ship. The Queen watched, her eyes wide. A human, frail in appearance yet fearless, had saved her life. She could only stare in awe as Ethan returned to the flagship, landing without a scratch, breathing calmly as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The aftermath of battle. When the smoke cleared, the Valkyrie fleet had destroyed most of Admiral Threx's core forces. The few remaining ships retreated into deep space, their morale shattered. The Queen's bridge was filled with cheering officers. Even Carax approached Ethan, nodding with a rare smile. "Your mind is as sharp as any warrior I have known," he admitted. Ethan merely shrugged. "I just keep thinking ahead." "That's all?" Seralis turned to him, her eyes calm but glowing with admiration. "You are no ordinary human. You have the courage of 10,000 soldiers and the mind to guide them." He gave her a small smile. "I just hope we can end this war before more lives are lost." The Queen placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "With you beside me, we will." Earning loyalty in the days that followed, Ethan worked with the Valkyrie officers to train their troops in hybrid strategies, combining brute force with clever maneuvers, predictable attacks with unpredictable diversions. The soldiers began to respect him not only for his victories but for his calm leadership. Even the younger Valkyrie warriors, initially skeptical of a human standing among them, began to follow his instructions without hesitation. They realized that strength came in many forms, not only in the size of arms or weapons, but in quick thinking, courage, and adaptability. Seralis observed these changes with satisfaction. Her empire was learning to value intelligence alongside might, and she knew that it was all because of one human who had chosen to stand beside her. A quiet moment. After another long day of battle planning and training, Ethan found himself standing beside Seralis on the observation deck. The stars stretched infinitely, silent and beautiful. "You did well today," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. "We did well. Your fleet is strong and disciplined. I just guide them a little differently." Seralis smiled faintly. "You guide them with a human heart. That is rare among the galaxy's strongest warriors." He looked out at the stars. "Sometimes thinking is stronger than fighting." The Queen's gaze lingered on him. "You have shown me that humans are not weak. They are unpredictable, adaptable, and extraordinary." Ethan gave a small, modest smile. "We just try to survive." Seralis watched him silently for a long time. The war was not over. Admiral Threx was still alive and his anger would grow. But she knew with certainty that Ethan would be ready, and so would her people, inspired by him. The warning a few hours later, a secure communication channel opened. The holographic figure of Admiral Threx appeared, his scarred face twisted in rage. "You have humiliated me, Queen," he hissed. "Your human tricks have cost me my fleet. But do not think this is over. I will return, and next time your empire will not survive my plans." Seralis's eyes were calm. "We will be ready, Threx. This human is not just a tool. He is the strength you cannot understand." The hologram vanished, leaving only the quiet hum of the ship. Ethan stood beside the Queen, silently reading the tactical data. He's planning something, he said calmly. Seralis nodded. Yes, but now we know what humans can do. And I will stand with you, Ethan. Together, we will face whatever comes next. Outside the observation window, the stars burned steadily, unaware that the galaxy was about to witness a new kind of war, one guided by courage, intelligence, and the quiet, unyielding strength of a human. The galaxy seemed quiet, but Queen Seralis knew better. Silence was only temporary. The shadow of Admiral Threx loomed somewhere in the darkness, plotting his next move. In the command center of the flagship, the Valkyrie fleet rested, engines humming softly, crews moving through maintenance routines. Yet even in calm moments, tension lingered. Seralis stood beside Ethan Cole, watching the tactical screens. You've changed everything, Ethan, she said quietly. He glanced at her, brow slightly raised. Changed everything? She nodded. My people used to see strength only in power, in the size of ships, in energy weapons. But you've shown them another kind of strength. A mind that adapts, a courage that doesn't bend, and a heart that doesn't give up. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I just do what I can. That's all. Do what you can, Seralis repeated, almost laughing. You've saved my empire twice in as many weeks. Twice human. And now my people follow you willingly. Ethan shook his head slightly. I just think ahead. I don't want anyone else to die if it can be avoided. The Queen studied him in silence. There was something in his calm determination, something quiet but absolute. She could see it in the way he moved, in the way he spoke, in the way he planned. You are unlike anyone I have ever known, she admitted softly. The final threat alerts suddenly blared across the fleet. Sensors detected a massive formation approaching fast, more ships than had been seen before, and heavily armed. Ethan moved to the tactical console immediately. This is Threx's main force. He's coming to reclaim the sectors he lost. He's angry, desperate, and dangerous. Carax muttered under his breath. I told you humans could not lead in war. Seralis cut him off with a glare. He has led, and your arrogance has almost blinded you to it. Ethan studied the enemy formation. They're fast. They'll hit hard, but we can set up a trap, something they won't expect. He quickly rerouted drones and stealth ships, positioning decoy vessels around the perimeter. The enemy, seeing what they thought were the Queen's fleet, would charge directly into the trap. Your Majesty, Ethan said calmly, we can end this battle without losing a single one of our main ships if we follow the plan precisely. Seralis's eyes met his. And if it fails? He shrugged lightly. Then we adapt as humans always do, she nodded. Then we follow you. The battle of the outer sectors, the Valkyrie fleet moved as one under Ethan's guidance. The enemy attacked with fury, firing energy beams that lit up the void like stars exploding. But every strike hit decoys. Every attack was anticipated. Ethan coordinated every movement, calmly directing the fleet through dangerous asteroid fields and nebula clouds. Each maneuver used the environment to their advantage, turning every potential threat into an obstacle for the enemy. The enemy flagship, massive and deadly, moved toward the Queen's vessel, trying to strike directly, but Ethan anticipated this. He ordered a series of decoy signals and drone projections, confusing the enemy sensors entirely. As the flagship entered the trap, hidden Valkyrie ships struck from above and below, surrounding it completely. In moments it was disabled, powerless, and forced to surrender. The remaining enemy ships, seeing their leader trapped, retreated in disarray. The victory was complete. The humans' bravery. In the aftermath, the Queen walked among her officers. Soldiers cheered for her leadership, but their eyes also sought Ethan, the human engineer who had become a strategist, a tactician, and a savior was everywhere the fleet's success was remembered. Seralis approached him in the quiet of the command center. He looked up, calm and slightly tired, but there was a light in his eyes that came from knowing a plan had worked. You have done the impossible again, she said softly. Twice, Ethan. Twice you've turned defeat into victory. He shrugged. I just think, I watch. I act, she shook her head. No, human, you do more than that. You inspire, you lead without fear. You protect without boasting. You are extraordinary. Ethan looked away, modest but proud. I only want to help. Seralis smiled faintly. And yet you have done far more than anyone could have imagined. My people see it, and so do I. You are not just strong, you are exceptional. A rare kind of strength I have never witnessed in a human or Valkyrie. For the first time, Ethan felt truly seen, truly recognized. He had spent his life fixing machines, solving problems quietly, never expecting praise. Yet here was a queen of an empire, telling him that he mattered in a way that no title or rank could measure. The Empire's awakening. Over the next days, the Valkyrie fleet reorganized under Ethan's guidance. Officers who had doubted him now followed his instructions without hesitation. Soldiers learned to combine Valkyrie strength with human adaptability, making the Empire's defenses stronger than ever before. Seralis observed quietly from the command bridge. Her people were learning not just to fight, but to think. The galaxy would remember this time, the time a single human had taught an entire empire a new kind of strength. Even Carax, the once skeptical general, came to her privately. Your Majesty, the human has changed everything. Not just the fleet, but the way we see the universe. He has earned our loyalty and our respect. The Queen nodded. I have seen it. Humans are not weak. They endure, adapt, and succeed in ways we never imagined. Ethan Cole is proof of that. The Queen's all one evening, the Queen and Ethan stood together on the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly across the void, silent witnesses to their victories. You have shown me more than I thought possible, Seralis said softly. Ethan looked at her, unsure. It's just thinking and acting. Nothing more. No, she said firmly. It is everything. My people have learned a new truth about strength, about courage, about the human spirit, and I have learned that even a small figure, when guided by determination, can move entire worlds. That is awe, Ethan, and that is what you have earned. He felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet pride. For once he did not hide behind humility. Thank you, Your Majesty, he said quietly. Seralis smiled, watching the stars. No, human, I thank you. For your mind, for your courage, for standing with me when the galaxy expected you to fail. You have given my empire something more valuable than ships or weapons. Hope. Ethan looked out at the horizon, feeling the weight of the Queen's words. For so long he had only wanted to survive, to fix, to protect. Now he understood that his quiet strength had changed the galaxy. The human legacy, in the weeks that followed, peace slowly returned. The rebellion was scattered, leaderless and wary of the Queen's forces. Ethan continued to serve, teaching the Valkyrie not just to fight, but to think strategically, to adapt and to respect the value of life. Queen Seralis often observed him, quiet and focused, never seeking recognition yet earning it everywhere he went. She began to see the truth of her choice, not a mistake, but a decision that had reshaped her empire and reminded her people what true strength really meant. The fleet became a model of combined Valkyrie might and human ingenuity. Across the stars, other species began to speak of the human engineer who had become a symbol of hope, intelligence, and courage. And though he remained humble, Ethan felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for the lives he had saved, the minds he had opened, and the empire he had helped guide to safety. The final moment on the observation deck, Seralis stood silently beside him one last time before returning to her duties. The stars reflected in her eyes, and her calm presence radiated authority and trust. You are remarkable, she said softly, not because of muscle or weapons, but because of your mind and heart. You have shown the galaxy that humans are not weak, that even one person can change everything. Ethan simply nodded. I just do what I can. She smiled faintly, her voice quiet but certain. And yet what you do is enough to inspire an empire, enough to earn my awe. For the first time, Ethan felt fully recognized, not as a human among aliens, not as an engineer, but as someone whose strength had changed the course of history. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and in that moment, the Queen understood what she had always suspected. Humans were unlike any being in the galaxy, resilient, clever, fearless, and extraordinary, and the human beside her had proven it beyond doubt.